Good evening. Welcome to the October 17th, 2023 meeting of the City of Everett Planning Commission. Kathy, would you please take the roll?
Chair Chatters,
Here.
Commissioner Atkins,
Here.
Commissioner Zelinski,
Here.
Commissioner Yanusak,
Here.
Commissioner Finch,
Here.
Commissioner Ballard.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Adkins, can I call on you to read the land acknowledgement, please?
We acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Shahopes people, and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from October 3rd, 2023?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Kathy, when you're ready, would you take the roll on that?
Commissioner Ballard,
Yes.
Commissioner Finch.
Yes.
Commissioner Yanusak,
Yes.
Commissioner Zelinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Atkins.
Yes.
Chair Chatters.
Abstain.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner reports and comments. Do we have any reports this evening? No? Okay, we'll turn it over to staff.
Good evening, Chair Chatters, members of the Commission. I'm York Stevens-Watch, the Planning Director. Feels like we were here just 2 weeks ago, and then 2 weeks ago before that, and 2 weeks ago before that. So thank you for sticking with this this pretty regular schedule. We've had a lot of time-sensitive and important items that we've taken. Looking forward on the schedule a little bit, I think there's some relief in sight, although there's some potential meetings that we may ask that may continue some of this. I'll just go into those meetings to put them on the table. You can think about the scheduling, and some of them may depend on how some of these items go. But right now we are on October 17th. Our next meeting is November 7th, and that would be a special meeting, but we're proposing to hold the November meeting on the 7th and cancel the 21st as being pretty close to the Thanksgiving holiday. I feel like that's come up, and that was some of the reasons for some of the other ones there. So November 7 we would hold, November 21 we would cancel, then December 5th we would hold a meeting. And our focus is on the riverfront, plan development overlay and development agreement. But after this round and this limited amendment that we're discussing at this meeting and the following one, we'll be moving into some pretty intense deliberations around the Park District, plan development overlay and development agreement. I think the timing is actually good because we can think a little bit about this process and see how it's worked over about a decade period, a little bit more than that actually, and take some of the lessons learned and provide the necessary flexibility along with the Park District development and all that. So we would introduce that at the November 7th meeting, and then on December 5th we could have a public hearing and consideration of the plan development overlay, comprehensive plan amendment, and development agreement. If necessary then, and depending on how the conversations go, the level of questions and your comfort level at potentially reaching a recommendation, we could get that done in early December and send it off to the City Council, or if more discussion would be necessary, that could go to the December 19th meeting. So we would propose that that be held for potential continuation of the December 5th meeting. But if not, if we're able to complete the work on the 5th, then we could cancel that December 19th meeting. January 2nd does not jump out to anyone as a good day for a meeting, so we propose to cancel that one. And then we would pick up, I think, with a more normal schedule on that third Tuesday from then on, starting in the third week of January. Any questions about that sequencing and meeting schedule?
Not so much the sequencing, but how early can we have the Park District materials to review?
There is a draft environmental impact statement that will be released shortly. So let's see, if we're starting your review on November 7th, I can commit to having everything to you by the end of October. So you would have at least a full week before your first meeting with it. I'll see if we can even advance it earlier than that. The draft environmental impact statement, as usually is the case, is a great source of information about the details and the estimated impacts and all of that. And then you have the proposed plan development overlay as well that has the changes to the regulations that would need to make it happen.
Great, thank you.
That sound okay? End of December or October?
October sounds better than December.
Yes. Okay, the draft environmental impact statement on the park district is coming soon. We can have printed copies for you. I think it runs 300 or so pages. I like to read my big documents in paper when possible, so we can make a binder for you. But if you're not going to use it, we'll save the resources there. Maybe show of hands who would like a printed copy, and I'll make that order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And we'll also plan to have one available at City Hall in the planning department and one in each of our libraries for the public to review. There will also be a public hearing for the DEIS specific to that environmental analysis, and then we'll have a public hearing in front of the Planning Commission and a public hearing at the City Council as well.
Just to be clear, that'll be posted online then, or on the Planning Commission website?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with looking at it online.
Yes, you'll get a digital copy for sure, yeah. Okay, I think that's it for staff comments, unless there are any questions.
Additional questions, commissioners? Okay. Okay. At this time, we have an opportunity for public comment. To those of you who are joining us remotely, please mute your microphone if you're calling in. Mute your phone by pressing *6. At each opportunity for public comment, excuse me, I'll ask if anyone wants to speak. If you're participating remotely and would like to provide public comment, unmute your microphone or press *6 on your phone. Please provide your name for the record, and when you're done, press mute again. If you're in attendance and would like to comment, please fill out a speaker sign-in sheet located on the table by the door. Do we have anyone in the gallery here to offer public comment? Kathy, do we have anyone online? No participants. All right, thank you very much. Then we'll be moving on to agenda item 4A, the Riverfront Development Agreement Amendment Briefing.
Great, and we'll introduce here Gary Young, who's with Shelter Holdings, the developer for the Riverfront Master Planned project, and then he will introduce intern Eric Evans, who has been leading a lot of the work and coordinating in this regard. Gary, good to see you.
Thank you so much.
There you go.
Perfect, thank you. Hear me okay? My name is Gary Young, the co-founder of Shelter Holdings. It's very nice to be here with you again. Many years ago, we started over 10 years ago with this development. We're very excited to be at this stage and have made this much progress. And tonight, just want to touch a little bit on those areas, and Eric to get into the details. A little more specifically, our company goes back maybe over 40 years now. I started working with Polygon in 1980, and then subsequently in the 90s, my partner and I took over the business from our founder and then expanded and continued to grow. And we feel very blessed and very fortunate to have been able to go through multiple business cycles. And I think all of us, well, not all, but many of us will, go back to some of those challenging years. And it wasn't, to me, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but in the 80s, we had 16% interest rates, which were kind of unimaginable for my grandchildren or anyone in the younger generation today. And also in 2008, we had the setback, and we had unemployment up to 10%. And so now we've gone through this amazing period of time, and now we have a few darker storm clouds on the horizon, with rates being to the level they are. The multiplier effect is so dramatic. And we've been kind of pushing through with our program, because this particular development is a very complicated one to build and to go through the steps. And we're also working from an owner's position of a long-term property for our families. And so there's a great deal of quality and work that's gone into our community. And that's also takes additional time, especially with supply chain and other sorts of issues going along. But not to take too much of your time on that, we're very excited to be at this point. We have already some very happy, smiling faces of our residents who have moved in, over 40 families. You can go to our parking lot and see nice cars in the lot and people coming from different parts of the country, people working, some people in the Navy, some people from Boeing and many other companies. Kind of what's happening is what we were hoping to have happen. So we're very excited about that. We appreciate everything that you do is serving in this community in the city. And we're here today to ask for your support as we move forward with some amendments that will, we feel, enhance our community even more so. I passed around this little flyer information piece, and it references just our involvement in the community. And so we look at our obligations and our role in the community is not merely to be a property owner and working through providing housing, but it's also to be connected with the vital fabric of the community. And these organizations, more recently in the last few years, Cocoon House, which is over 25 years old and has had a very, very impactful role in this community. But for many of them, I've served on the support board for Forterra. I'm still active with them for the last 20 years. Housing Hope is very critical to this community. We've been supporting them for quite a few years. LifeWire and Rainier Scholars aren't so much here, but in the large community, Shack Art Center, we helped with some of the finishing of the early rooms and still support them annually. Village Theater reaches out to so many kids, both in the city of Issaquah area and here in Everett. Maybe perhaps 3,000 kids a year are benefited from the work that Village Theater does. And finally, the YMCA, which to me is a cornerstone. And Ted Wenta was one of my favorite people who passed away, but he was a real champion for the new facility that happened, and we're very involved with that and continuing that. So I apologize if I've taken too much time talking about that, but I think those are important aspects that have to be at least mentioned. So moving ahead, I'm sure you want to hear more from Eric and learn more just about what is going on with the community and where we're at right now and what we're looking forward to doing. So I won't take any more of your time. We appreciate your support, and we're here available at any time if you have questions or concerns, and thank you for your support. Eric? Eric and I have worked together for well over 15 years, and he's just amazing how he attends to detail and works with all the various complicated parts of a project like this. So we feel fortunate to have him with us on this team, and thank you.
Thank you, Gary. For the benefit of the record, my name is Eric Evans. Our address is 11624 Southeast 5th Street, Bellevue, Washington. In addition to Gary and myself, Eli Hardy from MG2 Architects. They specialize in mixed-use, urban developments with a heavy concentration of retail, and they've been helping us with what will ultimately be the proposal in front of you today. Given that not everyone has been here for the last 30 years, I thought I might give a little history of how we got here and some of the complexity and what's been overcome together. It's a very, very challenging program, the brownfield redevelopment. As most of you know, I don't know if Eli can pilot the presentation. What we're going to go through on the screen, maybe the next one. Did I? Yeah, we're going to go through this. What we're going to go through on the screen and in the paper copies is a little bit of history and some of the complexity. This is a 70-acre site. It's bordered by 36th Street on the north, the Snohomish River and the Snohomish River Trail on the east side, and 41st and the roundabout kind of comes in at that little triangle portion of the property. It, as many of you probably know, it was a landfill. It accepted refuse from 1917 to 1974. In 1975, the landfill was closed, and according to the regulations in place at that time, a foot of fill was placed over the entire landfill. In 1977, the council at that time decided that they would lease the property to a commercial recycler. And over that period of time, from 1977 to 1984, they maintained a recycling plant and stored a lot of tires. And probably, as many of you know, in 84, actually in 83 and finally in 84, there were two very large fires that occurred on the property. The image from the New York Times is probably one some of you may remember. It was a very significant fire. It burned for, from what I told, was over 30 days. It eventually got the attention of the Department of Ecology, and eventually they became engaged, and in 1985 and in 86, it was formally adopted as the then current model toxin program, which was a classified contaminated site that needed to be addressed. At that time, Department of Ecology required and requested environmental characterization be done on the property to determine kind of what the impacts of the property were on the surrounding area, the surrounding community, and the property itself. And in 1990, an actual consent order was issued that required a lot of groundwater monitoring, a lot of test sampling, and 2 interim actions were authorized to be done or required to be done. And the first was a regrade of the overall landfill. So more fill was placed on top of the site, and the site was capped. And a perimeter leachate line was constructed. So when you think about landfills, when water enters the landfill, it comes in contact, goes through the soil, it comes in contact to refuse, and it is then considered or classified as leachate. And we need to get that water out and take it somewhere where it can be treated. So in 1985, a perimeter leachate system was constructed around the property, primarily along the east end between the river and the property. And it connects to a sanitary sewer line. All of that water was monitored, sampled as part of the study. In 1998, the city applied for, through Department of Ecology and EPA, a brownfield grant. And that grant provided the city funds to study how the property might be reclaimed, how it might be redeveloped and put into purpose again. And it included a lot of resources to study the geotechnical characteristics of the site. So a lot of geotechnical borings were completed. A lot of landfills that some of us, Gary in particular, have worked on over the years have different characteristics. They have a liner on the bottom. They tend to store materials in certain locations. Everett was different. There was no uniform plan of where the refrigerators go or where the tires go. It was kind of just spread out all over. And there was no bottom liner associated with the original landfill in 1917. So the geotechnical explorations gave a very good picture of what the actual subsoil conditions were on the property. All that work eventually became codified into a 2001 consent decree. And that consent decree provides interim actions that the city was required to do that included a methane collection system so that methane could be extracted from the property, a perimeter system. All landfills eventually produce some sort of methane gas. As things decompose, gas emanates from the landfill. So the perimeter methane collection system allows the city to extract the gas from the soil and take it off-site and prevent it from migrating off the property. And it also provided really the rules of the road for how the future site would be developed. In any event, after studying it for a decade and making those investments with grants from Department of Ecology, the city decided that the path forward after all that work and study and all the requirements was to engage with a commercial developer experienced with these types of programs, and the property was offered to sale. In 2005, the solicitation went out, and by 2007, a developer was selected to move the riverfront forward under the original development agreement. And in 2000, I think it's 9, a formal development agreement associated with that. And the developer actually acquired the property from the city in 2008. In 2008 wasn't a great time, if you remember, for the economy. The Great Recession, the housing bubble hit, and that developer out of California decided, maybe I'm not the right person to carry it forward, and Gary and his group came in and approached the developer, and they eventually elected to sign the development and the property, actually sell the property to our group and allow us to move it forward. And that kind of summarizes a little bit of how we got here today. And after we acquired the property in 2013, we spent a fairly significant amount of time working with the city on one large commercial retail tenant, which you probably recall, who eventually, their founder died and decided not to locate here. And we went back to the community, developed a plan, a mixed-use plan that was with community input, and we brought before you, and eventually amendment to the development agreement came forward, was approved by council, and authorized us to move forward with this new mixed-use, mixed-income community. But the first real development efforts at that point then were to, on the landfill, under the consent decree, were to provide a connection to the 2 neighborhoods that had been built. There is a neighborhood to the north, townhomes, the Eclipse Mill townhomes, and then there's a neighborhood to the south, the overlook at Riverfront, that would like to go back and forth to Pacific and also avoid the train on Pacific and get out. And until there was a road built on the landfill, there was no way to do it. So the first exercise efforts of developing on the landfill under the consent decree was Riverfront Boulevard. Permits for that were issued in August of 2019. They have to go through the city and through the Department of Ecology and lots of technical professionals. And the actual road was completed in January of 2011 through COVID. I'm sorry, 2019 and then 2021 through COVID. I want to talk a little bit, if I could, about what's involved with a landfill. So we can go back one slide. Some of you may remember years ago, there were a very large amount of fill on the property, big, large stockpiles. And those stockpiles were there placed for a reason. Landfills, not only do they put out methane, the soils aren't stable. So the refuse tends to decompose over time, and it essentially causes settlement. So a large fill was placed on the landfill to induce settlement so that we could get to an acceptable design parameter of which we would experience settlement over time. Landfills never become stable. They will always continue to degrade. We'll have kind of what's called secondary decomposition of the materials. So the surcharge, the fill material, essentially reduces that settlement to an acceptable parameters. In this case, it's anywhere from 6 inches to 26 inches, depending upon areas of what the soils were. So once we completed the surcharge and fill, we then move on to actually building on the landfill proper with that settlement dynamic. So if I could go to the next slide. So, and then maybe the next one. So some of the unique components associated with working on a site that will settle 26 inches is that the pipes need to be flexible. You can't, as it were, have a concrete pipe and have it break and allow more effluent to essentially percolate through the landfill and then impact the leachate line. So all of the pipes that are out there are high-density polyurethane pipes that are flexible enough to accommodate the 26 inches of settlement that'll occur. Now, settlement in a landfill doesn't occur like you would think it would simply fall all 26 inches. They tend to settle gradually over time. So you just need the pipe to be able to withstand over 50 years that 26 inches of settlement. The other component is that every connection to a structure has to be flexible enough to adjust to the settlement. So we have flexible connections at every storm line, every sewer line, every water connection. We also pressure test them. So one of the things that we're required to do under the consent decree is to make sure that none of these pipes leak. We build storm lines everywhere else in the city, and it's not uncommon that they're surrounded by a rock trench, and occasionally they'll crack and water will transfer, and someday, if it's a real problem, somebody will come and fix it. But in this case, that's not the situation. Every pipe is air pressure tested to make sure that it never leaks. The other thing is, as you can see here on the green photo, you'll see things that you don't normally see. So under the landfill and under the road, there is a network of pipes that are methane collection pipes. There are a grid of pipes on center that are installed under the road and under all of the site that are in gravel trenches that have perforations in them that are connected to a vacuum pressure. And that methane collection system essentially draws out the methane from the soil and takes it to a station where it's eventually vented out in the air at acceptable air quality measures. Now, when we draw that out of the soil, occasionally what will happen is the methane will produce condensation. And because the methane has been in contact with refuse, we need to take that condensation out and get it somewhere where it can be treated. So we have a series of methane condensate pumps throughout the site that actually take that water that's accumulated, the condensation, and pump it to locations, eventually to the sewer line. And all of those pumps, if you ever go out and look at it, you'll see they're all networked together, so somebody at the city can actually sit in their desk and see how much condensate is being pumped, where it's being pumped, and the levels. So that's enough of this slide, if that's okay. So we finished the road in 2011, and it's time under the consent decree to build a building and a structure. So, sewer pipes have slope, 5% or 3% slope to make sure that they fall. So, a little bit of fall and a settlement isn't a bad thing. We can handle that. But when we're dealing with a building, we can't have a building settle. So all the buildings need to be on piles. And it's a requirement in the consent decree. So one of the components of the brownfield study gave us a good roadmap of how deep the refuse was in various locations. And the landfill is unique in the sense that it has a number of layers to the soil. So we go past the cover soils, we get to refuse, we go past the refuse, we get to what's called an aquitard layer, which is a soil layer that prevents water essentially from getting any further, and then we get down deeper to actual bearing sand. In some places, we're drilling down 90 feet to actually get to that bearing sand. Now, when we started, there was a real concern that we would drill a pile. Now, obviously, we can't drill a pile and auger it out because we don't want to bring all that refuse back out to the surface. So we would normally drive a steel pile through the cover soils, through the refuse, through the aquitard, into the bearing sand. But because we want to stop any potential for water to travel along the pile, past the refuse, through the aquitard, to the bearing sand, to an aquifer that's below, and in that sand layer, we need to make sure that doesn't happen. We don't provide a hydrologic connection. So we have a very unique pile configuration where we drive a steel casing through the cover soil and the refuse, and then come inside that driven steel pile and drive a driven grout pile through it. And we drive that driven grout pile all the way to the bottom, and then we pull the mandrel up through what we just drove through, and as it pulls up, it pours the column all the way up to the surface through the driven steel casing. And then we put steel rebar through the middle of the steel pile. And we test it to make sure it has the bearing capacity. And so if you were out there, you may have lived through us hammering away on these piles, but these are some of the unique characteristics of how we actually support the buildings. All of these piles are observed by a geotechnical engineer. We do a final report at the Department of Ecology. We do reports that demonstrate how far deep we drove the steel casing and when we experienced refuse, when we got out of it. We even hit a few refrigerators. But in any event, all those piles get driven and we pour a foundation on top of that. But within that foundation, we also install a network of methane collection pipes so that we can essentially draw out the methane gas under the building. And one of the things that we need to have when we install that methane collection is a barrier so that the gas can't escape up into the building. And so what you see on the right, we install a geomembrane in the building and seal around every penetration so that gas can't ever get up or can't follow a storm line, a sewer line, a power cable, or any kind of utility that would penetrate the slab. And the right is a picture of kind of that membrane. And on top of that, then we pour a concrete slab. So when you go out there, you'll never see any of this, but this is the environmental protections essentially that were required by the consent decree and how we got to developing these buildings. On the next slide. So this brings us to where we are today. We said when we were back here, and maybe some of you read it, we were, prior to COVID, working very hard to bring a type of entertainment anchor to the property that could energize the center. A lot of you, I'm sure, are following retail shopping centers, and a lot of the old shopping centers are struggling. We all shop and buy our shoes and shirts differently than we used to, and when we do go out to shop now, we're looking for places that are more vibrant, that we can grab a restaurant that we spend more time on, that are more immersive experiences. And the theater was one type of entertainment anchor that a lot of the retailers that we talked to and that the community said we'd really like to have here felt they were needed to support them. Retailers tend to follow an anchor. And so the cinema was kind of that anchor that we had a confidential signed letter of intent, but when COVID hit, I'm sure a lot of the theater business just was decimated. There hasn't been a new theater constructed in Washington since the COVID, and they're still recovering from streaming and a variety of other components. So we've spent a lot of time and effort trying to find that right anchor tenant who can provide that immersive experience and activate what is our kind of main central plaza that our first building flanks on. And today is the proposal to you of changing the cinema use, which is said we'd do when we found the right tenant, what we would do. And so the proposal today is to change the cinema use to an anchor food and recreational use, something that can provide the type of experience that people will want to stay and spend time on. So if I could turn to the next slide. So this is a blow-up of the anchor tenants concept plan. So if we go back, you can see we had a box, and if we go forward, you can see how we're kind of filling this box. And the anchor tenant proposes a series of indoor and outdoor pickleball courts with a chef-oriented a restaurant and a place for games, a place to linger, and it fits neatly and nicely in our 50,000 square foot pad that we reserved for our theater. It also has a nice connection to the riverfront plaza that was just been completed. And if we blow it up a little bit more, you can see kind of the layout that we've worked with the anchor tenant to configure. The building is on the north side because that is actually, the sewer is at that location, and grade is an issue when we're dragging sewer through a landfill, and that's the actual best location. It's also southern exposure, so as the restaurant spills out, they're catching all the sun. Those are the covered courts that you see there. They kind of have a central plaza, some outdoor courts, a plaza out there, and then the restaurant and seating. I can't share you the name of the tenant today. I was hoping we'd get through in one, but if we're back again in 2 meetings, maybe in November we may be able to release the name, but at this time I'm not currently available. They've allowed us to share all of this information and what they propose that we would build, but I can't give you the name. It's about a 35,000 square foot store and restaurant. It provides, like I said, both food and activity. If I could, and these, if you're not great with elevation drawings or plan drawings, this is kind of a schematic elevation of how their store fits on the site, the covered courts, the 2-story restaurant experience, and kind of that outdoor from kind of 2 viewpoints. And then the next, these are the materials that they would use for their building. They're all consistent with the materials that are currently out there at the riverfront building. Some brick, some nice storefront windows, a variety of metal, obviously. I think that is essentially the kind of extent of the information I'm able to share. They offer a kind of an indoor-outdoor family entertainment complex that includes casual, chef-driven restaurant, a sports bar, pickleball courts. They do professional instruction. They have space for live entertainment, yard games, and space for lounge outdoors with or without your dog, is the quote I was given. This isn't their only store. They're in 9 other locations. They are very successful. They are also active in the communities where they locate, which was an important thing for Gary and the group, that they're very much a member of the community. We would hope that they would be as successful as they are in other locations where they tend to get about 60,000 visitors a year. That volume is equivalent to some of the locations that you would think of like Topgolf, or that kind of draw is definitely what we're hoping to do to try to support the variety of other retailers that we're talking to. So right now we're talking to a young gentleman who wants to open a brewery, where we have an individual who wants to open an ice cream shop. We have a couple fast serve and sit down restaurants that are anxious to locate on the plaza in Building B. We're trying to nurse a couple others who want to operate some fast serve grocery type of services in the building. But all of these are very much dependent upon an anchor. And so we're here to change the use from cinema to anchor food and restaurant, get your support, move forward so that we can actually submit building permits and drawings for this use in December, with the hope that the store could be up and running in the middle or third quarter of 2025. Anyway, that was a lot of information, some history. I hope that was fun. That is a fairly recent photo of the building with the parking lots and the 2 mixed-use buildings, the plaza, some of the plaza you can see. The units have nice views of the river. If you are interested, we certainly have apartments available. We'd be happy to lease them to you. Like I said, we're about 50 of the 160 that are currently done. The furthest building from me is scheduled to be complete by January, February of 2000, and that'll be another about 160 residences. Eli and the team are working on 2 buildings to the north, C and D, but the primary focus right now is for us to get that anchor there so we can capitalize on this opportunity. I will tell you, having gone through the cinema drama, they don't come around a long time. So when we get one, we really need to work and make it happen. We've had a very, very good experience in Everett. This is very, very hard work, but it's a very collaborative experience. We solve problems on methane collection, things that you don't think about. I mean, the power here, the decision was to make that underground, so we didn't have a lot of above-grade power lines. When you think about a power line settling on your property, that's a complicated endeavor. And when those utilities come up into the building, the lines, the sewer line, the power line, the gas line, they're all going to settle. So the building has to accommodate the fact that the pipe can actually draw through that 36 inches and not affect any of the equipment in the building. And so these are a lot of the challenges that, with staff support, we thought through and came up with solutions, and none of the residents know, and that's perfect. So anyway, we're happy to answer questions. And it's a lot of me talking, so I'm sorry.
Quick question. You mentioned that this proposed anchor food and recreation,
Yeah.
they have 9 locations. Is that nationwide or is that in Washington? Or?
No, this would be their first store in Washington. They are in a variety of locations in the Midwest, in the Southwest, in California, Arizona. There are a few. Pickleball is growing. Everybody seems to love it. It was actually invented in Washington by a guy in Bainbridge Island, apparently. There are a few examples moving forward. You may have read about one in Arlington that's coming forward. A lot of those are kind of adaptive reuse. A building that we don't know what to do with, that we got to find a use for, and we can turn it into a pickleball. The nice thing about this particular, it is a full business with a use. It's not just we're going to try pickleball and see what happens type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
A question I just had about the timeline. I live in the riverfront townhomes,
Oh,
so this
great.
is all very exciting for me. But how long is it going to take to get all of this built up?
Well, if you get us through in one meeting, that would be magic. But the thought is that we would be through, it takes your action and council, that we'd be through council in December. We would turn in building permits for the foundation in the first quarter. So January, February, March, we'd turn in a slab and a pile supported with all the connections. And that would be a kind of an advanced foundation permit that could essentially allow us to complete that exercise by August of 2024, and then give the anchor tenant the ability to move forward with the actual building above. But I think it's, from womb to tomb, it's about 15 months. So there is pressure, if it isn't clear already, to hurry up and get that store there by the middle of 2025. It's a bit with these retail anchor tenants, it's a bit of a race. If I can't get it there, I'm going to put my investment where I can get it. So we have a great relationship with Everett. They've advanced building permits with us. They've accelerated the review. They have an eye for the complexity. So I think if we can get it in by January, we should be in a position to actually be there by the second or third quarter of 2025.
You mentioned that the tenant would be building the improvements. Is this a ground lease, or is this something that Shelter's building?
It is a ground lease. We have lots of things to build. We were hoping that we could solve all the complex problems, the piling, the slab, the methane barrier, the methane collection, the underground power and utilities, and let the tenant build with a third-party contractor above the slab. So far, the anchor tenant, 4 selected general contractors, 2 of them said, you know, I'd really rather not go to Washington. So it's likely we may end up building it.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I think it's a very time-efficient approach, so that makes sense to me. Will this be built all in one phase, or are there multiple phases?
The anchor tenant, everything you see there is what they need to open.
Okay, great. And then I will say, I think the buildings you've built down there to date, they look great.
Thank you.
These are very complicated sites to build on. And I love to see the progress. I think the landscaping and the way that you guys have done the boulevard, it has a sense of place to it, which I think is also very positive. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I probably should have mentioned it. If we go back all the way, so one of the complexities with the landfill is, like we said, we're required to not let water infiltrate through the site. So we install what's called a low permeable soil barrier over most of the site that essentially stops water from getting through to the site. And it's a 3-foot soil layer that we put in lifts that has special sand requirements to prevent water from getting through. In some cases, though, we don't have the 3 feet of room to install that low permeable soil barrier. So we install an actual LFG membrane. It's a geoliner that actually acts both as the methane barrier, but also as the water barrier. The downside to all this is that nobody wants to, or the Department of Ecology doesn't want anything to disturb that barrier. So we're not allowed to plant anything with roots that would go more than 3 feet. So we have a limited palette of materials. So for planting and landscaping. So when the landscape architect came forward, his vision was to come up with kind of a dry riverbed theme. And I think it's come off well, and the residents who've moved in have had a similar experience.
I mean, I think it looks better than Rucker.
Yeah,
So
well, I appreciate that.
First of all, thank you for being here. I'm very thankful to have a Washington and a local developer be doing this in our community. It's nothing against the California developer, but I think it's so cool, and I'm so thankful for you bringing this quality and doing this here. But just to clarify, so the anchor tenant is doing everything, but you were talking about some smaller tenants, ice cream shops. So is there other areas, or that's within this?
So if I could step away and still hear, so there are a variety of inline retail locations that are in the mixed-use buildings that are planned to be retail. Those spaces are currently leasing through Real Retail. If you drive out there, you'll see a sign. And those spaces are the ones I was talking about, a brewer and a fast serve restaurant, ice cream shop that are looking to be following the anchor.
Okay, so the proposal that we're looking at is specifically this one. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
very clear.
Yeah.
One other question. And I wasn't here when you were doing the cinema, and whether that worked out serendipitously for us here and having this. It's a mixed income development. So is this still appropriate for the mixed income demographic that you're bringing here? Is that it just seems like it might be different?
So at the riverfront, with the development agreement, 2 income thresholds were chosen for the mixed income. 80% of the area median income and 115. Both of those are close to the market rate for residents in the area. So we're not seeing we're just seeing people who need a little bit more support and who work at the school district, who work at a variety of other places. So not anticipating any issue whatsoever. In fact, I think we'll find people who will love to play pickleball and head out at the restaurant as well. So not seeing that. And, the area median income for a household of 4 in this area is $146,500. So we're talking, these are good paying jobs. These are good incomes. So it's great to support those working class families.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all.
Thank you. I really actually loved hearing the history and of how that old landfill has evolved over time. So the retailers that are planning, are they aware of this as the new anchor instead of the cinema? And
I'm at the same quandary with them as I am with you. I can't release the name. We tell them we've got an anchor, it's coming, but I can't yet tell them that.
right, but not the name specifically, but the type of facility and.
You're the first to see it.
Okay, so they're not even aware of what
Nope.
the type of facility might be.
Yeah.
So we don't know if there would be any feelings by the retailers as to whether or not this were an anchor that they would want to follow into this particular space.
We have a variety of brokers who we're able to kind of share, and they're able to tell those tenants, you're gonna love it. And there's a couple of tenants who, they're in locations where they're there as well. So it will have a galvanizing effect to add some courage to, because it takes courage to live above a landfill. Even if
Indeed.
you don't know what's there, so. And open a business under landfill. And in addition to the barrier, there are methane sensors in the buildings. So we have a series of methane sensors in the ground floor. It's connected to the HVAC system so that if gas ever finds a way through a pathway, a sensor goes off, it's connected to the HVAC system. It increases the air exchange at very low levels of methane. And if it reaches to 20% below the explosive limit, alarms go off and we evacuate the building. So all these systems are all set up. So when the tenant goes out, the first thing he wants to know is the retail tenants, what's that thing in the space? But really, if you look at them, they look just like a carbon monoxide sensor. I mean, you would know, oh, okay, that's a carbon monoxide sensor. So it's not too threatening.
Thank you. Additional questions?
Just one question about the level of residential occupancy that you have now. How many households do you have that have moved in there?
So there are approximately 169 residences in the first building, Building B. It was open for occupancy in October 2nd, and there are 50 leases sold and about 40 people currently living in the property.
Okay. So were these people under the impression that a cinema was going to be built there?
Well,
I mean, to what degree was that used as a marketing tool to induce people?
There were a number of articles in the paper about the development agreement. If you read the staff report, there's an acknowledgement that when we went back to the council to take the cinema out, there was a number of stories that, that wasn't the case. So we're not marketing a cinema to any of the residents, as it were. I think, one of the things that's nice about cinemas, if you're a developer, is they park at weird times. So it's not a lot of park you can use during the daytime, but at nighttime it's kind of heavy. Well, the nice thing about the anchor tenant like this, the parking is more vibrant during the times of the year. So be able to get a sandwich, you get a variety of entertainment. This will be much more vibrant. And if you look at the way shopping centers are developed, this is kind of the direction they're going across the country.
I was just curious as to what kind of level of disappointment there might be.
We haven't experienced that. There's some things that they want that we're trying hard to get, and that's like bus service. There is a plan to have the transit run along Riverfront Boulevard, circle in the 3-acre park, and then come back along Riverfront Boulevard. But I don't know, staff is working hard to build a kayak launch and a water landing down there at the 3-acre park. And they got a grant from the federal government, but there's water permits. That's a lot of regulatory work. So I think that'll be there by 2025. And as Gary was talking to me today on the way up here, we need to talk to the mayor and figure out how to get the bus to get in there quicker. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Charles?
Yeah, I had a question around just noise, as someone who lives there and knows how just annoying the brakes on those trains are. What are the current plans for mitigating that noise, especially within, for that anchor tenant? Because I could imagine trying to play a nice game of pickleball it can be really distracting to just hear the screeching of a 100-car train for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, when I can share you the name, I can share you some of the locations, and they are in a variety of industrial locations currently that are similar to being next to a railroad track. So their business model and their buildings have been well adapted to those kind of sound attenuation. We're required to do with the staff comprehensive sound attenuation studies for the buildings. One of the things that we're proud of in the buildings, if you go out there, the windows are quite large. They actually come from Poland, and they're sound rated to be, and energy rated to be, they're triple pane windows. They were miserable to get here during COVID, but when they did get here, they provide great. And if you ever get a chance, and you'd be welcome to come into the building, you can't hear the sound of the train. So.
Commissioner Finch, you had a question or comment?
I was just going to comment that I think that Eric is being modest. I think the retail synergies are much stronger with this use than they would have been with the cinema. You're going to have much more activity down there, which I think is good for overall demand. That'll get those units leased up a little bit faster and maybe keep the inline retail full. So I think this use makes probably more economic sense, more community sense than a cinema would.
I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think a cinema at this point in time would be a questionable decision. So I'm excited that it's going in a different direction. But I'm curious if they're going to expand their court use to things other than pickleball, because that seems like it might be a little limiting.
They do have a variety of games in that open area. I think they do lawn bowling and a variety of other types of activities. But I can ask. Yeah.
Interesting. Additional questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate
Is
your
this where
time.
York gets to ask, can we approve this in one meeting?
Well, actually, maybe that would be a question if staff can answer. What is this plan then moving forward on this particular, what's the next step?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we are processing this conservatively as a non-minor amendment to the plan development overlay, but I think as a minor amendment to the development agreement. The process includes a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Council, who has the final authority on that. The criteria for amendment of the planned development overlay are the same as the original adoption of one and include the quality of the proposed development and its compatibility with surrounding properties, the unique characteristics of the subject property, the unique characteristics of the proposed use, the arrangement of buildings and open spaces as they relate to various uses within or adjacent to the planned development, visual impact of the planned development upon the surrounding area, public improvements proposed in connection with the planned development, preservation of unique natural features of the property, and the public benefit derived by allowing the proposed alteration of development standards. Now, I wouldn't apply all of those criteria just to this change. I would look to see if the riverfront development incorporating this change still adequately satisfies those criteria, and the staff recommendation on that would be that yes, it does. Definitely understand the evolution in the entertainment market, and it's important to note that this is not the market for an existing cinema or what have you. It's the market for developing a brand new one, and I think we're excited about the direction that Shelter's going with this and what they've been able to at least conditionally or provisionally land as far as an anchor tenant. The two things that we were looking for at the staff level for this piece was the level of investment and the draw of traffic, so making sure that it serves that anchor function of supporting the other commercial uses. I think with both of those, we're in alignment with the developer's interest on that, and I think they've satisfied those two general criteria there. So where that brings us today, if we would like to get to a recommendation today, I think that's something that we can support. I was over there typing up a resolution really quick. Like I said, this has been coming at us. This was a late-breaking thing, and happy to support it. I've got a resolution drafted up here. I can run up and print it and have the chair sign it, because code does require a written recommendation to the council, and I'm sorry that wasn't in the packet. The recitals of it would be the same recitals that are in the Exhibit A to your memo, which are the recitals to the legal amendment to the development agreement. So if the commission, yes, Becky.
I just wanted to confirm that they don't have to do this as a public hearing. This was not noticed as a public hearing.
Correct. I believe we can satisfy the public hearing at the city council.
Okay.
Commissioners, do you feel that you've had adequate time to evaluate this to be able to move a resolution forward?
I would move that we move, or I guess I would suggest or ask that we move forward with a recommendation today.
Thank you.
If that was a motion, I would second that.
And if it turns out that we need to fix something, we can come back and do that at the next meeting. But I think it'd be great to at least to get your opinion on the table.
Okay. I think we're in agreement that we'd like to move it forward today if we can.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Zelinski has a question?
Yeah, I just think that normally we would be the body holding the public hearing, and I think it would behoove us to have our recommendation just note for the record that we're essentially pushing on the public hearing to the council.
Sure.
That there was no public hearing today.
Sure, we will definitely reflect that, yeah.
Do we need to have the resolution printed for commissioners to look at, or could you maybe recite the pertinent language so we can vote on that?
Yes. We've got Planning Commission Resolution 23-04, a resolution recommending that the City Council approve an amendment to the Riverfront Plan Development Overlay and Development Agreement. And then I will turn you to your packets, Exhibit B, the recitals therein, followed by the Planning Commission finds that the proposed amendments to the Riverfront Plan Development Overlay meet the approval criteria in EMC 1929-050C. Now therefore, the Planning Commission recommends the following. The Planning Commission recommends that the City Council adopt the second addendum to the second amendment to the Riverfront Development Agreement as presented hereto as Exhibit A and incorporated herein as if fully set forth. And that Exhibit A would be this Exhibit B. So nothing really new other than the action and the title from what's in your packets.
What was the resolution name?
2304?
2304.
Okay, so we had kind of a motion, but do we
I'll
have-
make a formal motion.
Thank you.
Chair, I move adoption of Resolution 2304.
I second that.
Thank you. Kathy, would you please take the roll?
Commissioner Ballard,
Yes.
Commissioner Finch.
Yes.
Commissioner Yanusak.
Yes.
Commissioner Zelinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Atkins.
Yes.
Chair Chatters.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Young and Mr. Evans and Mr. Hardy, thank you for being here and for presenting that information to us. So I think that we can move on to item number 4B, which is the comprehensive plan periodic update land use element. And this will be an introduction to the land use element.
Thank you, Chair Chatters, Commissioners. Yes, we're starting off the land use element. We're going to bring to you in segments because it's so large. Basically, the land use element is the comp plan. Everything feeds from the land use element. So it's very complex, and so I thought we would start with residential because you've already heard about the housing. Now you'll see how the land use element will integrate or interact with the housing element. Not as exciting as the last presentation, but this is just the list of things that we'll cover. It looks longer than it really is. But essentially, the land use element, there isn't, like the other elements, there isn't a section or a planning goal that just relates to land use. It's basically our responsibility to do the urban planning in the urban growth areas to make sure that we can adequately serve the public in an efficient way and handle our growth. You've seen this before. This is how the inputs trickle down, the RCWs, the RCW in the mandatory element under 0701 is very specific about the land use element and has just a number of things that are required to be in this element. So some of the additional inputs that you'll see, we're right in the middle of doing our land capacity analysis. So we're starting with our buildable lands, which you may recall a couple of years ago, we briefed you on that process. So now we have kind of new areas that we would be growing, and so we're coming up with how much land capacity we're adding by changing some of the land use designations and/or development capacity. Because we were short on our 2035 numbers, our plans don't accommodate enough to meet our targets for 2035. We have to do a reasonable measures report. It's about 1,500 units, so it's not huge, but we unfortunately still have to go through the exercise. We're in the thick of doing our environmental analysis on the 3 growth alternatives. And something that we haven't talked about a whole lot, and maybe we could, Sound Transit has offered to come and talk about this project, but we've been involved with the county, with Linwood and Sound Transit to come up with sort of, it's a model code so that as much as possible, we're the same in terms of design guidelines, requirements. We're all different. We're all still going to have different things, but to help smooth the way for permitting the Sound Transit projects. That helps them with cost, and as you know, we're still short money to get the whole thing done, so anything we can do to help in that way. It's a fun project to be part of. It's funded by the Federal Transportation Administration. And then we have a number of functional plans. We've talked about that before. There's some things in the housing action plan that we'll need to include, not just in the housing element, but here in the land use element as well. We have a stormwater comprehensive plan. There's a bicycle master plan, just a number of things that we need to make sure that we integrate, and/or if under our updated plan, maybe those plans need to be updated. So. And then, of course, additional inputs will be community input. Other areas of focus, and we've talked about this before, applies to a number of the elements, but actually planning for light rail, you'll see when I talk about the growth concept that's in the land use element, that it does talk about the high capacity transit, but this is the time to go the next step as part of that. Climate change will also be something that we need to weave through the land use sections, and then the equity, racial disparate impacts, and displacement. The land use element purpose is to link all plan elements to the same land use assumptions. So when we're looking at the capital facilities and utilities element, that we're sizing our infrastructure to meet the growth numbers and the way that the growth is being planned to occur. It talks about the general distribution of different uses of land, and then it does also, as required by the Growth Management Act, talk about population densities, and I've got some slides to share on what that looks like. building intensities, and the estimates of future growth. So in the very beginning of the land use element, it talks about what the land use growth concept is. And it might look familiar to you because it's alternative 1 in our growth alternatives. And that is that growth goes to the high capacity transit areas. The 2015 plan does defer growth, designating growth, specific growth to those areas through a sub-area planning. We will do that, but we will likely, excuse me, assign at least a minimum amount of density in those areas that we would then take into the sub-area plan. The high-density mixed-use redevelopment in Metro Everett and along arterial corridors. Excuse me.
I've come prepared with cough drops if you need one.
It's like, where's yours? There was an emphasis too in the 2015 plan on creating sort of that higher education center up in the north end. That hasn't really been talked about much in the last 8 years that I've been here, maybe a little bit, but we need to check that and see, is that still something that we think is likely to occur? And then how does that relate to the Park District project? You will see that there's a lot of guardrails around the single-family neighborhoods and not encroaching and making very few changes to those neighborhoods. And also protection from encroaching commercial uses on any other zones. There's some exceptions for that. Some of the small neighborhood business, there's some criteria that allows you to locate some of those corner stores within neighborhoods, and those are definitely appropriate. Home occupations, and then talking about some mixed uses in some of the commercial areas along with residential. So you notice there wasn't a lot of goals and policies just strictly related to residential, but it does talk about the wide range of housing types, certainly not as much as it will be this round. As we know, the middle housing bill and other legislation. It just supports the infill housing that integrates with and enhances those neighborhoods. Same thing, discouraging conversion of residential neighborhood areas to non-residential uses. Keeping the high density around the transportation in the concentrated way. It does support the recreation, and I was thinking as we were listening to Shelter Holdings that, and even one of the items on the GMA checklist was creating more opportunities for physical activity in the community. So that fits very nicely. And then some interesting policies around healthcare clinics. Before we had maybe some of our zoning code regulations, there's a number of maybe dentists, little clinics, little offices in neighborhood areas. And so there's some policies around how that should be handled. That also includes the hospital. If you were around that time that the hospital did their expansion, and that was controversial. And so there's some really pointed policies around not expanding any further into neighborhoods. That presents a different kind of challenge. As we grow, we will need more healthcare facilities, and we'll need more hospital space. And if you don't add on to what you have, then where does that go? So I just want to share this with you so you get grounded in it, and then show what we've been looking at all along, and as we've talked about our alternatives, and this is the table that talks about the population intensities, so units per acre, you'll see in those areas for residential population, and then building intensity, so we've got to establish that. So under this plan, remember, we're a little bit short in our capacity, housing capacity. So this is where we'll look to see what we would need to do possibly to increase the residential capacity. And then just as the way this plan is laid out, you have the land use designation, which is your comp plan designation, and then over there on the right, you have what zones fit under those designations. So you can have a number of zones that fit under multi-family. The idea of whether or not to continue using the term single-family, would that be appropriate? So these are some of the things that you'll start to see as we're discussing them internally and bringing those kind of things forward to the Planning Commission. So here's the scheme that we've used in the alternatives. And so thinking about, one of the things that we've been thinking about is, should we change our designations, our land use designations, and then think about, especially for the single family and then the middle housing, do we create a couple of different zones there? Because the regulations will likely be different, that will change as we address the middle housing issue. And then on the right there is just the table form of the alternatives and how we use those designations. So I have some questions I thought I would ask. That really is all that we have related to residential and population growth in the land use element. So I thought we could ask, are there any other inputs to consider that you can think of? Are there any policy or growth concept components that should be added other than from the inputs that we've talked about? That includes the state legislation that we're going to have to address. And then any thoughts, and you don't have to answer these tonight, of course, but any thoughts about those potential designation changes, and would they make more sense to us moving forward with kind of a plan that is accommodating the new target? So I will turn it over if you have any input to share.
I like that we are considering how we should treat the single-family residence designation going forward. I'm not sure how we should move forward, but I think it should be considered, and I'm glad that we are doing that.
I took a look at one of the documents that the state produced as a guidance document, the one on middle housing for Puget Sound. And I don't know if you are considering going through that kind of an analysis with our neighborhoods, but I could easily see that leading to some refinements in our land use designations. Some of it could possibly be accomplished through changes in the development regulations, but I could see a little bit of both happening there too. I like where they're going with that. It hones in on how middle housing can fit into single-family areas in an appropriate way, and it's not just a free-for-all.
Right. Because we have different lot patterns in the north than we do in the south, and those guidance books really take the time
It
to
looked very
look at
heavily
how
at
they
that.
fit in.
Yes.
I don't know if I mentioned that I'm on a technical committee at the Department of Commerce, and we're working on a middle housing model ordinance that, that cities could use as their starting point to meet the new legislation. And/or if cities don't do anything and they're supposed to, then they would be subject to the model ordinance. Not by choice, but so it's very interesting to see all of the work they've done. They've really given it a lot of careful thought and consideration.
Additional thoughts, commissioners? Is this something you kind of want to marinate on, think about a little bit?
I sort of have a question, I guess, on the, I'm just trying to figure out how to think about it, or where we're going to actually discuss it, or how it fits into the comp plan. But when we talk about equity and disparate impacts for different groups, so I am for, and again, I'm thinking of the option where we're densifying heavily around main corridors and traffic and things like that. And I think about the lack of safety in the street and crossing. And so, I mean, if we put all of our density there, we know that we're already having deaths and traffic accidents, people getting killed crossing the streets and things like that. How is that looked at in that lens? I don't quite understand, like the SEPA, to me it's an issue in safety and things like that, but where is that actually considered and thought out? And, is it a good idea to put that, or what are the mitigating things that we need to do to accompany that if we're going to put all of our density in a certain area?
That's going to be addressed through the environmental impact statement. So it's going to be addressed in the social justice and equity section. So each component, along with the overall evaluation of the environmental impacts, which includes safety, transportation. So we'll start to see some of that analysis coming out of that work when we get to, as well as evaluating each of the policies related to how it's impacting the equity, or is it causing racially disparate impacts, and what's the mitigation for that? You look skeptical still.
Not necessarily skeptical. I'm just trying to figure out how are we, I guess, how am I seeing that evaluation, or how is it being brought to the commission or to the public in general? I mean, that's happening. When did they talk about that? I know that usually I'm hearing or understanding, when, we talk about the roads, they're measured in level of service, but not necessarily safety to the other measures of transportation, which include people walking and crossing the street, and bicycles and things like that. So I feel like that kind of gets missed, or it's such a minor focus that actually what really truly affects a lot of people that aren't driving cars those needs are kind of ignored.
Yeah, and this go-around, we're required to have that lens through everything that we're looking at. If you think about, if you're living along a corridor, cars, fumes, gas smells, noise, I mean, there's the safety, but there's also other impacts. And if you put your more affordable housing there, then all of the low-income people live there. So you've got to find a way to mitigate that issue, those issues.
Yeah, and I don't want to beat a dead dog. I mean, this is my third round through the comp plan change, and I've never seen that addressed in any kind of meaningful level. So I'm very interested if this time's different, and I think we have different language, and I think it's set up to look at it differently, but I'd be very interested, and we'll keep an eye out for that.
Maybe we could do an agenda item on just that at an upcoming
That's a good
meeting.
idea. And so what Commissioner Ballard is referring to, so you're saying this should be incorporated in the 300-page document we expect to see towards the end of this month, these types of analysis, is that, or at least the beginnings of these types of analysis, is that correct?
You should see that in the Park District work
Okay,
for that project
okay,
specifically.
okay. Additional questions, commissioners? Okay, does that complete that introductory presentation? Becky?
It does.
Okay.
Do you want to step back in? I want to demonstrate the story map,
Oh, yes, great idea.
but I will
Yeah,
let,
good, keep going.
Okay.
We'll end with the, turning back to it. Yes.
okay, so, let me just go to the website. I don't like.
I should note this now makes every single chair appear, plus the podium that I've sat in already today. It's a true team effort.
So I'll go through the first sections really, really quick. I won't stop and read them, but basically we're letting people know what's new, because we did have some information up here earlier that was really project information, beginning project information. We're sharing about the growth geographies, and then we have some scrolling maps that talk about the alternatives. That was alternative 1. This is alternative 2. Alternative 3, not yet. So when you get a chance, you can go and check it out. And then the specific amendment requests, we've got those here too. So we've got them labeled, and the reports that you saw earlier, these are the ones that made it through. There's more information on that. And then this is the interactive map. And here's the instructions. So I'm very curious when you go home and try this, if the instructions work. And so this, when there's not a line through it, that means that's the layer that's on. So if you go to, well, all I can think is City Hall's address. So if I go to, just type in my address. So it'll bring me to this. If I click on it, it will tell me what the zone is, what our comp plan designation is, and then what it's designated in each one of the alternatives. You can go to the legend to see what all of that means. Whoops, different layers, so you can turn on and off the different alternatives if you like. We also put the building heights map on there, Parks and Recreation. So, but the easiest way is just to go in and type your address.
Curious, are you able to track discrete visits from non-city IP addresses?
We can track the visits. I don't know if we can track if they're from the city or not.
I'd just be curious to know how this tool gets used.
Right. I don't know. I can check, see if we've got any
And
way
it's
to
brand
measure
new
that.
right now, so we
Yeah.
wouldn't have any data, but over time.
Well, our first day, we had 9 visits.
Okay.
That was
I was
exciting. Oh, okay.
3.
Yeah, so as you're going through this, if you have any comments or suggestions, please feel free to email me.
I will say, and I want to congratulate Becky and Erica and others who worked on that. I do think it's a game changer for explaining the alternatives and the comprehensive plan to the general public. We started working with a consultant team on the transportation element aspect of it, and the first step of that discussion is the land use assumptions. And I turned straight to this. Obviously, they're consultants in the transportation field, and they know their way around complex planning documents, but nonetheless, we started here and it told the whole story in a way that would be difficult in a more technical type of a report. Big picture all the way down to the details that folks can see. So I do think it's a game changer. The people who find it, I guess it's more about the marketing or the advertising of it. So we'll try to find as many ways as possible to get it out there to the public, because I think it will be helpful to them. So nice work on that.
I think it's a great tool, so I'm excited to look up my property. So I guess that's homework for everyone. Go home and look up your property and see what it says. We do have an opportunity for public comment at this time. Do we have anyone in the gallery who would like to offer public comment? Do we have anyone online? Okay. We do have item 5A, the comprehensive plan periodic update project status.
Yeah, and that basically the status was showing you the story map, so.
Okay, that's why I wanted to clarify. And so if that is the final agenda item, then we have concluded our business for the evening. Okay, sure. We'll hold for just a moment.
Okay, thank you for bearing with me on that. Like I said, this was a quick moving one, as you heard, the negotiations with the potential tenant, and that's something that we don't want to interrupt with procedural issues. Nonetheless, want to be as consistent with our procedures as possible. This development has been going on since before 2009, consists of a plan development overlay, which is embedded within a development agreement, which is paired with a property disposition agreement, all of which have been amended to the point that we're now talking about the second addendum to the second amendment. The procedures have changed over that time too, and it is not always clear exactly which procedures apply to which types of amendments. Amendments to the plan development overlay are broken into minor and major. Minor can be done administratively. Major requires going back to the same original approval process. Amendments to the plan development overlay similarly have a distinction of minor and major. It's a different distinction between the two of them. The plan development overlay and the development agreement are mixed together and then accompanied by 98 other legal instruments that are associated with this development. We structured this particular amendment with a recommendation by the Planning Commission out of an abundance of transparency and being conservative, and also keeping with the practice that we used with the first and second amendments to the development agreement and plan development overlay. I'm not sure that we needed to, but I think it was the right thing to do. Hopefully you found it instructive on the history of it, and the anchor entertainment piece is a significant portion of the development. Whether a cinema and a anchor food and recreation represent a change of use that kicks it into a major modification, that's debatable. Whether it rearranges buildings and all those sorts of things is debatable, but nonetheless I think it was the right thing to do to come to the Planning Commission. The public hearing associated with the plan development overlay, as Commissioner Zielinski pointed out, does rest with the Planning Commission. In the interest of an expedient process, we wanted to get this written recommendation out from the Planning Commission, and I will consult with my attorney tomorrow to see if this appears to be a safe and appropriate way to do it. I added a recital, so everything that I read to you and explained to you before is exactly in this written document. I added recital F on the second page. Simply put, the Planning Commission defers a public hearing on the matter to the City Council. We will still, under this procedure, notice and provide an opportunity for the public to be heard on this matter before the City Council. If council, spelled differently, our attorney feels that it would be a better strategy to come back and reconsider this 2 weeks from now with a public hearing, we'll put that on the agenda and we'll be back to redo this with the public hearing. If it seems like the substance and the procedure, definitely we've fulfilled the spirit of it, in my opinion at least. So this could be the end of it, but if, depending on legal advice, we may be back in 2 weeks. So I appreciate that. If there's any concern, you have the ability to reconsider within this meeting, but my recommendation would be to let me check with my attorney, and then we will be back. We'll be back 2 weeks with a report, and I guess you'll know if you see it on the agenda or not.
Is there a precedent when the previous plan is not viable?
Yeah, there's a precedent with this.
With the procedure?
There's no
because-
precedent with this individual development. It was revised in 2000 and, what was it, 11, I think, because the previous plan was not viable. Different aspects of it have been amended at different times. I think it still needs to fulfill the criteria. It still needs, it may change, but it would still need to fulfill the basic criteria for the plan development overlay and the development agreement.
Okay. Well, I think that the Planning Commission wants to move forward, so I think that we'll just find out what legal says about it, and hopefully it won't show up on the agenda, but if it does, we'll hold a public hearing at the next meeting. Any additional comments, questions on this item? Anything additional from staff? Okay, with that, we have concluded our business. Thank you.